Good morning and welcome to the National Newspaper Publishers Association's Let It Be Known on this Wednesday, February 16th, 2022. Because of the legacy of slavery in the United States and persistent discrimination against African Americans throughout history, popular culture and the entertainment industry has long presented Blacks in a disparaging way. African American roles in film have not been completely rooted in reality, and some critics note that they say more about white pathologies and fears than the complex lived experiences and culture of the Black community. From the inception of motion pictures and television, African Americans have often been depicted in unflattering ways. This includes portraying African Americans as being deviant, violent, dim-witted, or as comic relief for the film. Hollywood's history of portraying African Americans is our topic for discussion this morning. We discuss with Nite media journalist Peter Bailey, Northern Kentucky University professor David Childs, who authored the article Representations of African American Characters on Television and Film. And also we have the pleasure of having Grace D. Gipson, an assistant professor in the Department of African American Studies at Virginia Commonwealth University. But first, let's bring on Peter Bailey of Nite Media as we talk about the headlines this morning. Good morning, Peter.
How you doing? Good morning, Stacey. It's always good to be with you, brother.
It's always good to see you, Peter. Peter, we're going to run through some headlines. And our first topic this morning, school board members across the United States have endured a rash of terroristic threats and hostile messages ignited by roiling controversies over policies on curtailing the coronavirus, bathroom access for transgender students, and the teaching of America's racial history. The news service Reuters said it documented the intimidation through contacts and interviews with 33 board members across 15 states in a review of threatening and harassing messages obtained from the officials or through public records requests. The report notes that the hostility faced by school officials mirrors the campaign of fear documented against U.S. election workers in response to former President Donald Trump's false claims of voting for it. Peter, there's this element of fear in our nation's schools, particularly when it comes to teaching anything about the history of slavery or even the Holocaust.
You know, Stacey, I find that fascinating because as a journalist, just for many years, it's I guess our nation we're at this moment of reckoning, right? Because at the end of the day, it seems this is a tough one for me because I come from the Caribbean, and I'm from the Virgin Islands, brother, and we're still a colony. So it's the concept of America having to face the truth, right? America having to face the understanding of who they are. And I remember we were having a debate when I was on tour in Charleston, and I was trying to understand the taking down of the monuments. And I know this journalist because I tend to try to listen to everybody, and he comes from a Confederate background. And he was like, well, Peter, that's my history. So you're telling me we need to censor history. So I would say let's juxtapose, let's look at the hypocrisy, right? They didn't want the monuments down because in their perspective, the Calhouns and these guys, gods. I remember when I was on the campus and I asked them to remove there was some paintings of Confederate soldiers in my room. And I had never dealt with that, man. So I said, look, this has to go. But then I stopped. And the lady, while she was removing the images, I saw she was sad. And in her perspective, these guys were heroes. So if you guys want to keep that raw history, well, then let's tell the kids everything. We can't cherry pick, right? We can't cherry pick. So
absolutely not.
We can't cherry pick. And I think we eventually have to deal with this because there was a Facebook video I saw that blew my mind. It was a kid and he was yelling at his parents, white kids, Dad, you're a racist. We're tired of this. We're over this. So I think America is at this crossroads. When the George Floyd thing occurred, we were out there protesting. Stacey, that changed my life because I'm with my guys. And I had only went out there because, look, man, it was about protecting some kids. Because we saw a bunch of kids, the cops were going crazy. And it was a bunch of white kids that encircled me. And they were yelling, And I'm like, yo, these cops are about to beat these kids. And my buddies are looking at me, yo, those are white kids. So my point is, I think even white America is at a crossroads.
Yeah.
You can't hate black people when every day your child is listening to Kendrick Lamar, Jay-Z. Every day your child is being inspired by black artists in their ears, whether it be music, film. So I think we're at this crossroads, Stacey.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, let's also welcome to the program the president and CEO of the National Newspaper Publishers Association, Dr. Benjamin Chavis. Good morning, Dr. Chavis.
Good morning, Peter. How are you, my man? It's good to see you, and thank you, Stacey. And I agree with Peter. Listen, racism is a two-edged sword. It certainly cuts people of color, but it also cuts white people. You know, racism is not good. Truth is therapeutic for all human beings. And we should be trying to do the best in our educational system by teaching the truth to all students, no matter what race. And in terms of the elections, the democracy is stronger when everybody participates. So this same fear, there's a racial fear that because of the change in demographics in America, that people of color are going to take over the structures. And then due to whites who will be the minority, what was done to Africans and other communities of color. So part of the fear is retribution, the fear of retribution. But one of the things we learn from a faith perspective, if somebody does you wrong, doing wrong back doesn't equal to a right. Wrong plus wrong is more wrong. And I think that what we need is to, I agree again with Pete, that we are at a crossroads. And the question is, the Trumpites wanted to go back to the Confederacy, progressives, and there are a lot of progressive whites that don't agree with Donald Trump, but their voices are not as vocal, their voices are not as amplified. And the Black Lives Matter movement after George Floyd gave everybody an opportunity to amplify their voice. And that's what happened, not only in America, but all over the world. So now we're in the midterm elections, it's 2022. This is going to be very telling this year about the future of America.
Yeah, and also in the news this morning, U.S. sprinter Sha'Carri Richardson, you remember her, of course. She missed the Tokyo Olympics after testing positive for marijuana, is calling out the decision to allow Russian figure skater Kamila Valieva, I can't pronounce her last name, y'all, to continue competing in the Beijing Games despite testing positive for a banned substance. She says, can we get a solid answer on the difference of her situation and mine's? Richardson tweeted Monday that my mother died and I can't run, and was also favored to place in the top 3. The only difference I see is I'm Black and I'm a young lady, she said. Ironically, the Russian figure skater returned to the games yesterday amid anger from other athletes, and she finished first in the competition. So we see a stark difference. Remember the outcry when Sha'Carri tested positive for marijuana use and they banned her from the games. Well, the Winter Olympics allowed this Russian skater into the games who tested positive for a banned substance, and she actually won.
Again, Stacey, but let's go back to Sister Richardson. First of all, she should not have been banned. I don't think people should agree with her being banned. It's interesting, you know, and then the jury is still out on the Russian. You know, after they investigated, they found, you know, I don't want to get into who's right and who's wrong, but the thing is, I don't think any athlete should be banned from any sport if there's a legitimate reason why they did not pass a particular test. Richardson passed subsequent tests without any trace. So the unfair application of the test based on race or based on nationality, that's the problem. These athletes are not the problem. It's the testing that's the problem, and who tests, and then who draws the conclusion. We all know that there is no fairness in the United States, and there's no fairness in the world. And so when something unfair happens, we shouldn't be shocked. That's the world in which we live in, where the privileged get a better shake than the underprivileged, where those who are not of communities of color get a worse evaluation, a worse outcome than those who are not from communities of color. That's a global reality.
Well, Peter, also one of our viewers, Angela Connolly, is always good to see Angela. She says, she makes a point, Peter, that marijuana is not a performance enhancing drug, whereas whatever the Russian skater was alleged to have taken was a performance enhancer drug. Your thoughts, real quick, Peter?
Guys, I'm from the land of Marley. I'm from the Caribbean, so I think that Chev, what you said is that there's always a double standard. There's always, look, man, let's just be honest. When I worked at Time and Newsweek in these places, it was almost the black person, brother, we had to be rock stars. We had to have writing the most golden prose. I was working alongside white peers that, man, they just walked up in there because their uncle was buddies with the editor. So we understand what's happening in disenfranchisement. My thing, I'm always I'm always happy to talk with you, Mr. Chavez. But I think that when do we reach a point of, like you said, that is the world. So when do we say, okay, we're going to own this? We don't like the table that was designed, so we're going to build our own. So we don't have to keep begging. I don't like begging. I don't like asking for stuff that, as a man, I'm supposed to have. So I'm saying, black people, let's own. We understand what's going on. We know what's going on. So I'm just about building an ownership right now, Stacey. If that makes any sense.
It makes a whole lot of sense, Peter. Also, this morning, speaking of begging, I'm sure many have begged this phenomenal young woman, the supermodel of all supermodels, surprised the world last year when she announced that she was a new mom. Speculation ran rampant, including many doubts that 51-year-old Naomi Campbell had given birth, but likely adopted. Well, the pioneer model unveiled not just her 9-month-old daughter for the March issue of British Vogue, but she revealed that her daughter was not adopted. In a statement, she says, she's my biological child. Naomi Campbell goes on to say, I can count on one hand the number of people who knew that I was having her, but she is the biggest blessing I could ever imagine. It's the best thing I've ever done. About her daughter, Naomi said, a beautiful little blessing has chosen me to be her mother. And all I got to say is congratulations. Big Naomi Campbell fan. And she's such a trailblazer, Dr. Chavis. I know you've had the privilege of meeting her in the past. She's such a wonderful, wonderful example of a supermodel.
Right. Well, she's not only a supermodel on the fashion runways of the world, but she's a supermodel in the community. When we first started with, the Hip Hop Summit with Russell Simmons, she was one of the first global celebrities that supported the summit and encouraged artists, performing artists, and other types of creativity to work together to improve the quality of life in our community. So I join with you. Congratulations to Naomi Campbell, and certainly her daughter, and obviously her fashion career is not over with yet.
Blacks do not crack. 51. She looks amazing.
She is amazing. And Dr. Che was speaking of the Hip Hop Summit. There is an invitation to you from your buddy Russell Simmons to chair another Hip Hop Summit. So we're looking forward to those details in the near future. Dr. Chavis, so we'll check out.
The issue in New York is trying to end gun violence, but it's again a national problem. It's just not a New York problem; it's a national problem. The extent to which everybody's so fascinated by the Super Bowl presentation by hip hop artists, but that just shows you that our culture can get people to think differently about. They expect us to somehow. We've already crossed that bridge. Peter knows is that when an outstanding artist hits the stage, it's been normalized now. We are expected to be excellent on the stage, but translate that now to, okay, then let us vote. Okay, then let our children have the best possible education. Don't applaud us to do one thing, and then curse us out when we try to
I always
build
say,
something on our own.
I always say I wish the larger world would love black people the way they love our athletes and our singers, right?
Exactly.
I think we're here to just, like in the Caribbean, the Virgin Islands, a lot of times black people, We're just here to accent a postcard. We're here to entertain. We're here to make your life a little bit. But no, it's time for us to be at the table.
Exactly.
Russia might go to war. We should have a voice in what's going on in world affairs. Don't just call me to make you laugh and make you sing. No, I don't, or be this model like the Green Mile of the Negro that's just going to take the lashes, but he's going to be upstanding. No, call us when we got to discuss world politics, the economy, and healthcare. Right. Call us then.
Peter, that's a great segue into our primary topic this morning, and let's discuss that, how Hollywood portrays African Americans. Let's talk now with Northern Kentucky University Professor David Childs, who authored the article "Representations of African American Characters on Television and Film," and Professor Grace D. Gipson of the Department of African American Studies at Virginia Commonwealth. Good morning, Dr. Gipson. And good morning, Dr. Childs.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. Boy, I love the energy. I love it. Dr. Childs, let's start with you. Usually it's ladies first, but I want to start with you this morning because you wrote this compelling article, Representations of African American Characters on Television and Film. What was the inspiration behind that? What did you see?
Well, first of all, as a child, I grew up in the inner city, and also as a young adult, I spent a lot of time in the inner city. And I've always been interested in representation anyway. And I noticed as I consume television and film, which I'm into the arts, I noticed that it was an inaccurate portrayal of Black life. It didn't talk about Black joy enough for me. Then also just my research background. I'm a historian. And my research is in popular culture, and looking at the ways that African Americans are portrayed in the media, both historically and present, and even particularly hip hop. I was glad to hear about the Hip Hop Summit. I've done some writing and research around hip hop in the ways that it is complex, and so that's why I wrote the article, to try to give a broader picture as we go forward. In film and entertainment and how we are represented.
Yeah, and Dr. Gipson, Hollywood can do a whole lot better, can it?
It sure can. And, we have to make sure to remind them of that, because I think they get complacent when a couple shows get, successful. They're like, okay, we did good for you all. Here's your bone. Thank you. We're good. And it's like, no, you have to continue to do this. This is an effort that has to be done on a regular basis, or otherwise people start forgetting, or conveniently forgetting, I'll say. And thinking like everything is all good. And I remember when people were talking about we live in a post-racial society, and I was like, where's that? Tell me where that is, because I want to see where that's going on. So yeah.
and Dr. Childs, you in your article talk about everything from the film Ethnic Notions in 1987 to Gone with the Wind in 1939. The comparisons are really, really interesting. We know that the portrayals in the 30s, of course, and 40s, 50s of Black people were pretty much what we see on the screen. So you drew that line. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the African Americans have the caricature of the comic relief, the Sambo, the Black violence. They stem from the legacy of white supremacy and slavery in this country, enslavement in this country. And it took a long time to create these notions of Blackness. And white America has become comfortable with African Americans being relegated to the comic relief, the lack of intelligence in the Black community. And those old narratives are still here today. And if you look at, for example, the 20th century, how cartoons are portrayed, Bugs Bunny, Warner Brothers, you see these caricatures time and time again, even as recent as the mid to late 20th century. You can be watching an episode of Tom and Jerry and you see the mammy figure. And unfortunately, my critique is that many in white America, they're all too comfortable with that. And so I teach in Kentucky, and when I walk in to my classroom, I have a predominantly white classroom. Many times I'm the first African American they've ever met. And so they read me through the lens of how African Americans have been portrayed, and it takes them a long time to even take me seriously, and to convince them that, hey, I'm giving you a grade. Hey, I have the knowledge that you need to move forward. And people are stuck in these stereotypes. So I appreciate this show because it allows us to begin to unpack the notions of blackness that are historically rooted. As a historian, I root things in history, and to help us understand how we got here and how we need to move forward. We need to talk about Black joy, hip hop, jazz, the arts, the Black intelligentsia, the writing community.
Well, and we noticed too, Dr. Gipson, and I want to get Peter Bailey in a moment, but Dr. Gipson, so when we think about television shows, I mean, many of us can go back further than this, but you think about the 70s and you think about when we had a Black TV show, we had Good Times, right? And, you know, solid family, stayed together. However, there's this always a struggle, right? Always a struggle to pay the rent, to pay the light bill or whatever. Then you had George Jefferson, and although George Jefferson was so-called successful, right? He was always beholden to Mr. Whitman, the white man, right? So this picture has been painted, and I think Dr. Childs noted too about the shows like movies like Shaft and Mandingo and Blackula, where they didn't pay the actors much. So whether you have the buffoonery on the screen or you had behind the scenes, you had, well, you know, you're going to do this for us, we're not going to pay you. It's just Hollywood has been horrible.
Oh yeah, and then, you know, also the fact that you don't want to bring in Black directors, you know, or if you do, it's, you know, very minimal few, like, or a select few who are going to still fit the agenda of what you're trying to portray. And it's like you got to do more. You got to stretch the story out, or you got to expand the story, because Blackness is not monolithic. Like, we are not all the same. We don't all come from the same place. We have different backgrounds. We think differently, have different perspectives. And if you choose to only pick one, then you're going to have, like what Dr. Child said, where students are coming in thinking that this is how we all act. This is how we all, you know, are perceived, or that, you know, even be surprised, like, oh, you're actually a Black professor here. And it's like, yeah, we exist. And there's many of us, you know, so, yeah, as we were talking about in the green room, kind of having to sit also in the discomfort of things and having to expose the ugly, expose all of that. But at the same time, let me tell you what we do good about. Let me tell you what, you know, is great about us, because we've struggled, but we've also persevered at the same time too.
Yeah, and I know that our colleague, contributor to Let It Be Known, James Wright of the Washington Informer, he always talks about his distaste for always seeing the Black man in a dress. Peter, I know you have a take on these on Black Hollywood and how Black Hollywood and Black actors and actresses have been used. I want to hear your take.
Well, you know, it's funny we say this because after the hurricanes, that's why I produced the Unbreakable movie about the Virgin Islands, because Sidney Poitier just died. Sidney Poitier was Caribbean, he's Bahamian. And I remember growing up, he basically shattered a lot of these stereotypes, right? But here's my issue. Where's the portrayal of I think, Professor, you mentioned we are not monolithic, right? So for my own personal journey of stepping out and independently producing movies in the Caribbean, the Unbreakable films and whatnot, let's talk about where do we exist? Go to Netflix, go to any one of your streaming services or wherever. If you see a Black person in the Caribbean, we're gonna be in some flower shirt, serving some tourists some drinks. I repeat, Sidney Poitier, the guy that shattered Hollywood's color barrier, is Caribbean. So when you mention we are not monolithic, it really hit a nerve. And my own personal journey of independently producing these projects, navigating these roles in Hollywood, having peers in Hollywood, for me it's tricky because some of my peers are there, they're directors, they're actors, they're actresses and whatnot, and we get in arguments sometimes because I just like to build, man. I get off on just taking something and building it. So when I entered in this space, you know, I guess I wouldn't say I'm naive, you know, we have been done Wrong, Stacey, but this is the thing. Where would the world exist without us? Let's just be honest. They keep telling black people go back to Africa. Really? Y'all want to live without us? What kind of world will we exist in without the brilliance of black artistry? So I say that my challenge to the black filmmaking community, even on my own journey, is we need more of us just building. We need more of us just jumping out there and building, because yes, that terrain, when I've been on this journey, I've had producers, I've had executives say, Peter, it's the islands, who cares? Like, Peter, if you're not coming in here, I mean, sometimes I don't say it outrightly, but if I'm not coming in here with a film where we're dancing calypso and we're, pounding drums and drinking some coconut water, we don't get listened to. So what we're facing is layers. So in America, the black man's a thug with the hat, he's shooting everybody and he's promiscuous. The Caribbean male is this happy, exotic feature that serves everybody drinks. And let's go back to how Stella got her groove back. I wasn't very happy, but it's still the Caribbean exoticized male. So let's dig deeper into how we ourselves emasculate us and kind of paint us in images that they put on us, if that makes any sense.
Well, Dr. Childs, let's talk about it. And Dr. Gipson, let's talk about those stereotypes, right? So we have.
Oh, you gonna get my groove back, Peter? I'm telling you, everybody's getting my groove back.
So there is, we talked about this a bit, as you mentioned, Dr. Gipson, in the green room, the magical Negro, right? There's the black best friend, everybody got one, right? The thug, as Peter mentioned, the angry black woman. There's always an angry black woman, right? And then I think, Dr. Gipson, you brought this one up too, the domestic. Why does it always have to be that way?
It doesn't have to be that way. And it's frustrating because, I mean, if you think about, like, that's not something that I desire to do, but I mean, yes, they exist, but that's not it. And it's limiting. And then if that's what people see all the time, and especially those who are kids growing up, and they're thinking, well, this is what I have to be, it's limiting. And it's to the point where, you feel like you're boxed in. And this is why it's so important to have these different representations of what we can do, where we fit in, what we've contributed to society, because they're very damaging. And clearly, I mean, these tropes that you're bringing up are long standing. So, I mean, long before I was here, and it probably will continue even afterwards. And so it's a lot of like dismantling, continuous dismantling that we have to do of these tropes and stereotypes.
Well, Dr. Childs, you wrote as far as the future outlook, I'm reading from your writing, you wrote that although some contemporary films and television have drawn on long-held stereotypes, there is optimism that the industry is beginning to move away from an over-reliance on stereotypes of African Americans in order to make blockbuster movies and successful TV shows. Talk a little bit about that optimism. Where do you see that at?
Well, I can talk about the genre of Afrofuturism, and I think Lovecraft Country is a perfect example. And then what Jordan Peele is doing with Get Out and Us, it has really revolutionized the black film and allowed us to dream bigger. That we don't have to be thugs, we don't have to be the Shanae stereotype on Martin or Wanda. But we can be thinkers. That's why we need more black filmmakers. We can be thinkers. We're human. We're Americans. We shouldn't be relegated over to the corner. And like take Lovecraft. It's so artful, and it's a part of a long genre, that Afrofuturism. But Lovecraft looks at the history, brings it into the present. It's science fiction. It's good writing. Even Tyler Perry's Ruthless, if you've seen that, that's so promising. But we have so much more to do. America has to get used to seeing us in intelligent spaces as doctors, lawyers. We had Bill Cosby Show back in the day, but that was limited in terms of the scope of what we had. When the Cosby Show went off, we had to go back to other stereotypes. But I believe I use the word Black joy, and that's the celebration of the complexity of the monolithic aspects of what it means to be Black. We're broadening the narrative because America had gotten used to us being relegated to a certain stereotype, the angry Black man. When we see the news, it's perpetuated, and people are comfortable with that. Even in the music industry, most of the consumption, most of the money that's spent on hip hop is the genre that's violence. But hip hop is more complex than that. There's the Kendrick Lamars of the world. There's a social conscious hip hop that started to make inroads. But by and large, America wants to spend money seeing me look like a thug, seeing the angry Black woman that will cut you, seeing the single mom that's struggling, the struggling narrative. And shout out to the single moms, but we're much more complex than that. But it's very encouraging. Black Lightning is another example that's just beautiful. But this is a part of a long tradition. Black Panther, that started out as a comic book back in the 60s, and people don't know that. And so Black Panther was really, really exciting. I remember talking to someone about Black Panther, one of my white colleagues, and we're comic book fans. And I was, when the movie came out, I love Black Panther. He said, I don't like it. I hated it. And I said, why? The writing's amazing. Did you see the characters, Mike B. Jordan and et cetera and so forth? The writing's amazing. Have you seen the comic book? I just didn't like it. And what it came down to, and we had a kind of a little disagreement, he didn't like the all Black characters. He didn't like the notion that African Americans were protagonists and sheroes, and that we had our own civilization and we really didn't need the white folks in that capacity. We could do it on our own. We're no longer slaves. They have to depend on the master. We could do our own thing. We got our own technology. And that made him really, really, really uncomfortable. He said, well, that's reverse racism. You know, we're like, wait a minute. The whole industry has been lily for years and years and years. Now that we make a couple of movies featuring Black protagonists, it's reverse racism. We have to change the narrative. And I just want to add and that's my project with my students in the larger university. I consider myself a public intellectual. When I first started writing, I wrote for the academic community only, and I still do that, but now I'm trying to broaden. That's what the article is about too. And so I'm just trying to help my students understand it. The reason we have Black Entertainment Network, historically Black colleges, the Greek community, is because we haven't had our own. And we haven't had our own. They wouldn't allow us to be a part of theirs, so we had to start our own. So Black churches, the ME Church, I'm a pastor myself. We had to start our own where we can be unapologetically Black, authentically Black in our own spaces without people telling us what to think and how to do. And that's the same thing with Black film and television.
Well, Dr. Gipson, when I think about, say, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, for instance, when you think about that, you had Uncle Phil, who was a very successful lawyer that lived in a mansion in Bel-Air. They had a butler. But then, and Will Smith is perhaps one of the best actors in Hollywood. However, in that show, he was kind of like, buffoonish, right? I mean, so some people complained anyway that he was kind of buffoonish. So you had to have that type of character when Will brings a whole lot more to the table than just comic relief.
Right. Yeah, it was, I think there's this like pacifying, the masses, and, let's, we'll bring you here to the table, but we need you to do this also and I think some of it has to do with making people feel comfortable. And as I tell my students, that's not my job to make you feel comfortable. My job is to make sure that you learn and you gain the information, not to make you feel comfortable. Have someone else, do that for you. And we have to move from creating these storylines that are fitting into a particular box. Step outside the box, break the box. The box doesn't need to exist. And, make sure that we have these characters or these representations of people who we're not seeing. Or if we're going to have the comedic relief, let that not be our only reliance. And that's the only thing that has to be put on the table. Yeah. Dr. Childs mentioned something that hit for me because I'm a huge comic book nerd myself. And Naomi, which is on the CW from Ava DuVernay, made me say, here we got Black girl magic, Black girls in STEM. You got a superhero who is a teenager, a Black teen girl. which is pretty much unheard of and had not been seen. So there is so much that is being presented, and it's just a matter of supporting it and recognizing it too.
Because you said something that touched upon, and maybe I'll play devil's advocate, Stacey, but one thing I always think about when I create, I really don't give a damn what white people or anybody thinks about. The danger is, okay, I think there's a danger here. The danger I see is when we're consistently trying to show the world there are Black lawyers. Maybe I'm wrong for saying this, but I detest the story of the first Black astronaut and all this type of stuff, because it's almost like when we have to go out of our way to highlight Black intellect and potential and greatness, it's almost like we're saying that's an exception. So my fear with certain portrayals of constantly having to show these positive images, which is true, because let's be honest, on Saturday nights, I might not listen to some conscious music. So what you were saying, Professor, is true. I don't really have an issue with certain content because life is real. Not everybody is an astrophysicist, and not everybody, like I said, on Saturday night, I may not want to talk about that. But what you said, Professor, is true. There's no balance. You have to present a dinner plate, right? But for too long, all we're getting is one aspect of humanity. You know, the machismo in hip hop, this, that, the other. Let's not lie on this panel. Like I said, on a Saturday night, if Future comes on in a club or a gala where you guys are at, you're going to start to bob your head. There's nothing wrong with that. But the problem is there's no balance. So here's the danger. The Green Mile character. There are villains in the Black community. So I like to look at creation as the Black persons are the hero and the villains. I think the fear in Hollywood, white people have this, okay, we have to show this side. So is it almost becoming disingenuous where we're trying to prove to white people or this larger world that we are intellects? I don't care. No intellect.
Peter Bailey, we're gonna have to leave it. Peter, we're gonna have to leave it there. We are way out of time. I'm so sorry. This is a discussion again that we could have gone on, and we certainly, again, Dr. Chambers, we're gonna have to revisit Professor David Childs, Professor Grace Gipson. We certainly appreciate you guys.
Thank you.
Of course, Peter of Nightcap Media. Check Peter out, Nightcap Media, you guys. And of course, Dr. Chambers, every Sunday on PBS TV, The Chambers Chronicles. Check it out. It's a really good show. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we will see you tomorrow.